Welcome to Mystara for another remaster. This one going for a twofer, as Master of the Desert Nomads and the Temple of Death are up, modules X4 and X5. Despite being standalone, module X4 was the explicit setup for Temple of Death, and it made little sense if you played it as a standalone. The pair are universally considered a single edition and will be treated as such here. They are also one of the best adventures TSR created. Ranking number 8 on the best Mystara modules is done by yours truly. I'm Mr. Welch, and it's time to ask, who's the master? Both modules were written in 1983, predating the Gazetteer line by several years. The legendary Zeb Cook authored both, with Keith Parkinson and Jeff Easley doing the art for Master, and Timothy Truman handling all the art for Temple. The adventurers gave Mystara some of its most iconic monsters for the first time, with the Boot, Nagpa, Soul Eater, Juggernaut, and Tabby appearing in Master, and Dusano, Geonid, Malfera, Mugina, and the Spectral Hound debuting in Temple. That's 10 monsters in just one adventure. Master takes you through the nation of Sind, though this version has none of the Indian allegories for which the country would later be known. Hul has a robust Persian vibe, and they did focus on that aspect later in different source books. The adventures are wilderness-focused, but Master far more than Temple. They aren't hex crawls either. If you go so far along the route, you will find the significant adventure points no matter what. No taking a wrong turn and missing out on the adventure. The action will come to you, no matter which way you head, as long as it's vaguely in the right direction. The party is hired by Darrican to find a lost patrol in Sind, meaning you'll need a party for the reason to be there. Master starts at level 6, recommended, so you are established adventurers by this point. There is an official retcon of the starting village of Pramayana in Champions of Mystara to reflect that it's in a fertile plain rather than a desert. In addition, the Great Waste does not include the nation of Sind, but it's found on the nation's western border. These changes are noticed and corrected in later products, so that's a plus. As I stated, the first module was the more wilderness-related of the two. Temple has a brief section on getting to Hul, and then you're right into the meat of the module, which is obviously a dungeon crawl. The encounters you're going to hit along the way are some of the best D&D ever had to offer, and even hinted at a few locations that would become part of Mystaran lore later. The Demiplane of Nightmares is first introduced here, including 2 nightmare monsters. The Dimensional Vortex gets its first appearance, and that was later expanded in the Immortal series, though not in great detail. Lastly, this is the first reference to the invisible moon of Miyashima, as the party can get sidetracked and vacuumed up to visit the land of Samurai Jungle Space Cats. The moon isn't named, it's just a reference to the Moon Kingdom. This reference then boomerangs back in Voyage of the Princess arc, where Prince Haldimor finds a Samurai Jungle Space Cats contingent in Sind. The modules were rather popular with the TSR authors, as you can tell, because they made a serious effort to make the details of their canon in the timeline. This wasn't entirely possible, as the sequel, Red Arrow Black Shield, was kicked to the far future because it made a mess of the setting. More on that in the next remaster. These modules were the first ones to expand the known world, first presented in the Isle of Dawn, and gave us one of the most iconic villains from Mystara, only rivaled possibly by Bargle. The Master would later return in Module X10, but it would also be a major power player in Mystara all the way through 2nd edition and into the Poor Wizard's Almanacs. The allure of the Desert Nomad series is how it opens up the new areas, and while it doesn't flood you with information, it gives you a glance at what lies just outside the world they know. It does this without turning the villains into a cartoon. Considering this was the 80s, that's admirable. It pushes the characters to make the right decisions based on the information they discover, then screws the players over with a clever plot twist few suspect. At the start of Master of the Desert Nomads, the players are hired by Darrican as part of a large mercenary army to find out what's with all the reports of a massive army in the Great Wastes, or what would later be defined as Sind. Only the party is recruited as reserves. The body of the main army marched weeks ago, and the party is sent out to find why the command lost contact. Cue the adventurers getting the actual quest from the guy they save from certain death, or he gives them the quest with his dying breath. The adventure is very much on a railroad, but as the entire goal of the mission is to get to the Temple of Death, it's hard not to be on a straight line. You don't have to make many changes to the module after Sind was retconned later, because the action picks up in the Great Salt Marsh, or Nimkin Yalaka as it was later renamed. The swamp is particularly dangerous because of the numerous ambushes and one of the nastiest encounters the party will ever face, which became the trademark of the series, the Malakaz. It's the spirit of an evil wizard who, after her death, managed to turn the area around her hut into a trap. She's not undead, but it's more like she's cursed the region with her dying breath. You will need a spellcaster with specific spells to escape this encounter, because the party can't leave without those spells. Every night the Malakaz tries to drain a creature of its ability to think, leaving those affected as vegetables. This encounter could end in a TPK if the party is ill-prepared or doesn't have a wizard or cleric. To avoid this, the DM may have to fudge. If they try to leave the area, all paths lead right back to the hut. Burn the hut down, and when you leave, you will now return to the now restored Malakaz's hut. You can get clues on how to escape the trap, but again you need the right spells. Fighters and thieves are useless here without DM fiat. You have a choice for the caravan and bandit encounters that make up a large portion of the central section of the adventure, as the module has a strong Arabic feel and Sind is based on India. Either keep with the Indian vibe and change up the encounters, or make them more Hooligan in nature and change them to a Persian theme. Either way, in the overall theme, this is purely cosmetic. If you want to upgrade the camels to 2 humps, that's on you. If you want, you get a grand battle with desert raiders against a caravan, but the players can hide and watch the caravan get slaughtered if they don't want to get involved. It's not very heroic, but it is an option. Then they have a quick jaunt to the hidden temple that's just a straight shot to the end. It doesn't even branch out to other directions, where you have to stop a Nagpa from destroying the map. The players are going to get frustrated with the Master, as he's always one step ahead of them, because he's cheating. But they can figure out how he's spying on them if they look hard enough. The party will face multiple groups in this module that are far too numerous to handle. They will need to use diplomacy, subterfuge, or stealth to avoid conflicts. Some of the groups are helpful. Others serve the Master directly. This gives the characters plenty of roleplay opportunities because while they're at spirit level, even they can't take on 200 bandits if things go south. Alignment is central here because the dervishes they encounter will help them, but only if they're not evil. Then the party has to get around a large raiding party that can be rather informative if the characters play their cards right. Then the module concludes with an encounter that is going to make your players hate one particular D&D monster, as while they're expecting betrayal by anyone at this point, they are going to find their supposed benefactors quite tough, numerous, and worse, the party doesn't know which of the NPCs are monsters and which ones are telling the truth. You've got a party that has been immersed in paranoia at this point, having been spied on the entire time, and now they find a supposed ally that, of course, will be the most brutal fight so far. The players can spot the bad guys if they're suspicious, but not so suspicious that they don't see the actual friendly NPCs that can help them. Then right as the party is done with all the backstabbing, Master of the Desert Nomads ends. Time for Temple of Death. Temple of Death is recommended for levels 6 to 10, but there's a very strong suggestion that at least the cleric and fighter be on the higher end of that scale. It's still a linear game as you're headed to a specific location, if the title didn't give that away. Go through the pass where the Desert Nomads left off, into the town of Magdon, through the Darkwood, and finally find the Temple of Death, which takes up half of the module. This adventure is notoriously lethal, even for a Beckney product. Zeb Cook does not pull punches, and he does give hints to the DM about which path the players need to take to succeed. Stealth is optional, and not in the joking manner. The players are facing numerous foes that are powerful, and who will use divination magic to track them if they screw up. Balancing that out are some of the most memorable encounters ever put inside of a module. The party will learn quickly that this adventure plays for keeps. There's lots of illusions, trickery, and more save or die checks than new players will think possible. The first part of the adventure includes a cave disguised with hallucinatory terrain, an insidiously hostile beam of light, a mock dragon operated by ruffians, a mammoth airdrop, a hallucinatory fungal castle, a skybeam bridge leading to the Kingdom of the Moon, a rather reasonable cloud giant dormant at the end of the valley. And if you think this sounds like a wild ride, you would be correct. All of these happen in just the first section of the adventure. These encounters are why Temple of Death is considered a classic. Zeb Cook is a game writer without equal, and his prowess is on full display in just 3 pages. Once you've survived that gauntlet, you will finally reach Hool, or at least the borders of it. That's when the module goes from difficult to sadistic. Hool is run by a priesthood, where paranoia is the most treasured attribute. Everyone is spying on everybody, and the party is no exception. They don't have to act strange to make the local leaders suspicious of them. It's their default status. The local population is cowed into obeying. You aren't going to find friends easily. You will have a difficult time if you aren't human and disguises are mandatory. Their chief method of finding traitors is mind probes and torture. There are two chief methods of finding traitors are mind probes and torture, and truth serums. There are three chief methods of finding traitors is mind probes, torture, truth serums, and torture. They really like torture. The players are going to have to use extreme caution to get the information they need without getting caught. Then the party gets to the temple after finding its actual location. The Master sends a flying ship powered by skeletons as a special invitation. He's been tracking their actions, almost from the start of their quest, and wants to make them an offer. Or destroy them utterly, he's not picky. He is possibly the greatest example in D&D of an evil diviner, and just how much of a pain they are. How do you sneak up on somebody who can follow your every move? While a flying ship with a skeleton crew is a great idea, it only goes to certain death, but the players won't know that. But if the players got this far in the adventure, you better believe they'll suspect it. The characters are in for a hell of a time when they get to the temple. Most of the villains are clerics, and more than a few diviners. Everyone is fanatically loyal to the Master, and your only allies are prisoners whose goals are often just survival at all costs. The temple has multiple surprises, including a teleport trap that isn't quite a trap, but will still remove a character from the adventure if they aren't careful. It's not fatal, it's just they're too far away to further participate. This part can be frustrating beyond belief, as the Master is one of the most formidable foes ever, and even when he dies, he has a bad habit of not staying dead. He is a high-level cleric whose backup plans have backup plans and all that. I'm not spoiling the end of Temple of Death because I want your players to get the same feeling of frustration my players did all those years ago. These modules are defined by their completely unique and memorable encounters. Monsters don't just jump out at you. First you have to go to some mind-boggling location and then get jumped by the monsters. The modules are brutal, deadly, and far superior to most modules written, even today. Especially today. The players can do everything right and still lose. But then they get to try and fix that with the next remaster, Red Arrow Black Shield. But until then, Master, Master, where's the dreams that I've been after?